everyone. You are listening to the Wellness Project with Des, powered by Spotlight Coalition, and this is episode number 88. On today's episode, I speak with Gemma Baxter. I think this is a very important episode because it is something we've never covered before, and honestly, I didn't know much about. Today, Gemma will be speaking with us about her experience with perinatal depression. She's going to talk about what it is, its symptoms, how it affected her, as well as treatments. This is a very important topic, and I'm so grateful that Gemma is on to spread awareness about this because I think a lot of women experience this and we have no idea. So it's so important to hear what it is and how to treat it. I do want to give a little warning here. I'm so sorry. The sound quality on this episode is not great. I didn't realize until after we were recording that my microphone had never connected. So for my portion, it sounds very kind of echoey and distant. Luckily, I'm not speaking as much, so hopefully that's not too much of a distraction or too bothersome. But on Gemma's end, we did have trouble with our connection, so she does cut out a few times. And in the instances of her cutting out, it reconnected us. So it almost sounds like her speech is sped up. That only happens a few times. So I think you'll still get a lot from the episode. I did edit out the parts that sounded distorted or anything that was too messed up. So while the sound quality is not as great as some of my other episodes, it's still important to listen to this message and learn about perinatal depression. All right, so let's get into it and let's speak with Gemma. Gemma, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really looking forward to speaking with you because I'm really looking forward to you telling your story, telling it to my audience, because I think it's such an important topic that not a lot of people are open about and talk about. So I would love for you to give us a little introduction to who you are, what you've experienced, what you've been through, and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. So my name is Gemma Baxter. I live over in the UK. I have a lot of history with mental health, the main one being postnatal depression, prenatal and postnatal depression. I was diagnosed originally the first time with depression, and then I have been don't like the word, sufferer, since I was pregnant with my eldest, who is not far off turning 13. So we're looking at almost 14 years of a very consistent period of mental health.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And can you give us a little bit about what prenatal and postnatal depression are?
Absolutely. So prenatal depression is depression that is induced in pregnancy. So it can start anytime from, I believe, as soon as you fall pregnant. Mine was diagnosed or noticed from about 3 months pregnant. And then postnatal depression is the term that is used for depression that is experienced once the baby has been born. So it just defines the two periods. And I think there's also a term that's used for the whole period, which is perinatal. So during the period of prenatal and postnatal depression, I was under mental health team. So that might be another term that is heard in relation to pre and postnatal depression.
Okay, gotcha. And can you give us a little bit, can you tell us how you experienced these different depressions, how they affected you, what this looked like for you?
To kind of give some understanding, I was originally told at about 19 years old that I wouldn't have children. I was absolutely desperate for children. It was a bit of a blow. So I eventually found out that I was pregnant. It came as a bit of a shock. And I think that the combination of emotion in believing that it wasn't going to happen to then falling pregnant very quickly triggered some issues that were going on there. I was going very quickly downhill when I was pregnant, and it was a lot to do with loss of control. I felt like I was out of control. I felt like I wasn't good enough, wasn't capable enough. In one breath, I was being told it wasn't going to happen, then it had happened. So I felt like someone was going to turn around and go, "Oh, sorry, we've got it wrong again." No, it hasn't. And I think a lot of these mixed messages were really creating a bit of a spaghetti junction, so to speak, in my brain. It was quite a difficult time because it was almost not quite hearing voices. It wasn't quite psychosis level. My thoughts were extremely intrusive, and it was a lot around this control, this "you're not good enough, you can't possibly do it," thoughts that really just felt uncontrollable.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So, can we go back a little bit? So, you were told that you were unable to have children. I
Mm,
mean, for
yeah.
somebody that wants a lot of children, as you explained, I can't imagine
Mm.
what that felt like. Can you explain your reaction and how you felt, what was going through your mind?
Of course. So originally, I've always struggled with very painful periods. They found a cyst the size of a basketball, and it was kind of around one of my ovaries. So when I had to go in for surgery, they had suggested that I would lose that ovary. So I was kind of aware of worst case scenario. Coming out of surgery, they told me that I had lost the ovary and they'd also found which is where the lining of the womb ends up outside the womb or in other places, but very commonly fallopian tubes, ovaries, that kind of thing. It can make it very sticky and very difficult to conceive. As well as that, they had also said that my uterus was tilted slightly backwards. And all of these things combined, and as I say, at 19 years old, they had given me very, very strong information that it wouldn't happen. Essentially, not to hold my breath, which at 19 years old is not what you want to hear. I dreamed of being a mum. I was that 3-year-old kid with all the baby dolls and the push chairs, and that was literally, people said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I want to be a mum. It was my life ambition. So it was really, really hard to take on, and I did experience a real period of, looking back, I was probably grieving. It was a real grieving process I was going through, become extremely jealous when other people would say how, they were having a baby, or somebody who fell pregnant by mistake. It just felt like a wave, a constant wave. So it was really tough. And being so young, I just moved away from my parents, so I wasn't living anywhere near them. I was about 150 miles away. So kind of felt like I had to go through a lot of it by myself. I didn't know the area. There weren't really any support groups. I didn't have a group of close girlfriends that I kind of spend some time with. So I really spent a lot of time in my own head. I think that the difficulty was, even when I tried to articulate how it was making me feel, there wasn't really anybody, there was no consistency in care. So I'd go and see one doctor, and they weren't really picking up on the fact that I probably was suffering with quite a serious case of depression at that point, because the rug was pulled from underneath me. I wasn't never expecting that. I was expecting to lose an ovary. It's essentially life changing for me.
Right. Yeah, I can't even imagine. So then you said you got pregnant just 5 months later. So what did you experience with that? That must have been incredibly shocking for you.
It was. So my husband and I got married, and we were told that over in the UK you can have, I think it's 2 or 3 rounds of IVF on the NHS, our National Health Service. So we were very young. I think it had to be 28 or 30 to be able to receive IVF, but we also had to be proving that we were trying to have a baby for 5 years or something. It was a really, it felt very pie in the sky at the time. It felt like, really long time before we were going to be able to be in that position to have IVF. Financially, we couldn't have afforded to pay privately. So we made the decision as soon as we were married that I would come off birth control, because, well, it made sense. Obviously, we were married, we had our home, show that we're trying straight away. So that if for whatever reasons the goalposts changed, we could go to our local healthcare team and say, yeah, we've been trying, it's not happening for us. Naturally, 5 months later, it was a shock. It was at that point I'd started to build a life outside of being a parent, because I knew that I needed that focus to be on something else. So I had just enrolled in a university course 4 days before I found out I was pregnant. I was looking at buying a ridiculously sporty car that I would never have fit a pushchair in. I was really building this life that could have helped support me through that time. Yeah, taking a pregnancy test and finding out, because I just didn't feel right. There was something not right. I just had a feeling. I wasn't feeling sick or anything, but I just had a gut feeling, very, in my intuition. And I was terrified. I wasn't ready. I hadn't prepared. As I said earlier, I like to be in control, and I was not in control at all in this situation, because although we were actively trying, because we didn't think it was going to happen, I suppose I hadn't started to mentally prepare myself for being a mum, all the things that come with that, the loss of identity, and all of these things. So it was, again, there was this new wave of emotion that was probably a lot less anger. There was a lot of sadness, a lot of disbelief. But again, it came to this point of thinking that someone was going to tell me I'd got it wrong. And obviously, we know in the first 2-3 months of pregnancy, unless you have morning sickness or you're really unfortunate with your symptoms, there's nothing that tells you you're pregnant. So I spent a real long time thinking that someone was going to say, "Oh no, sorry, you made a mistake. You made a mistake." Essentially, like they did with telling me that I couldn't have kids.
That is just a roller coaster of emotions. So, at what point of being pregnant did you start
Absolutely.
experiencing the NPD?
So I had around 8 weeks pregnant, I started to have pain, discomfort, and went into hospital into the early pregnancy unit to be scanned to just do a check and make sure that everything was okay. And I think a lot of that was because I was borderline hysterical that I was going to lose the baby. Everything was healthy, everything was happy. And I think it was at that point that my husband realized that something wasn't quite right, because I should have been, I'd had, it was confirmed by that point. We could see the baby was healthy. There was no indication that I was going to miscarry. And I was not, I don't even know, I was black. It was blank. There was nothing going on inside. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. There was just nothing. He had identified that obviously the roller coaster of emotion that led up to us, to us conceiving. He'd seen all of that. And then to see me not experiencing or expressing any emotion was very concerning to him, because I'm a very emotional person, very emotive. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I, at that point, hadn't really noticed that there was a problem, but he kind of had an inkling. It was in the back of his mind. It was about, I don't believe we'd had our 12-week scan. And I was very, very emotional by this point. I was really, really struggling. And everybody I spoke to, "Oh, it's pregnancy, oh, it's hormones, it's normal." So I didn't think to bring it up with the midwife. I didn't think to say anything. But it got to a point where I was questioning whether I even wanted the baby, which, as I mentioned, it was all I'd wanted in life. The day that I had, back in the days when we had phone books and we didn't go online to get the numbers, I had the phone book out and I was looking at, I don't know what they're called, I guess birth planning, family planning clinics. That's the one, family planning clinics, which over here is where we go for like the morning after pill and all the way up to the extreme of abortion. Obviously, I didn't go through with it. I have my son. Everything is fine now, but I think at that point, to get some help. This isn't normal. This is not the right kind of behavior for someone who's desperate for children, who was told she wouldn't have children. And 3 months into that perfect utopia is talking about getting rid of the baby. That was a really, really tough time. And I think looking back, I see it. I see that that was not normal. In the moment, all I kept thinking was, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. This isn't right. It's not meant to be. And I just felt like I needed to have control over the situation. This belief that someone was going to take him away from me was, if I'm in control, if I do it, if I take him away, then I'm in control and I'm okay. That was, I would say, the real turning point. And at which point I was put in touch with the perinatal mental health team, and they had diagnosed prenatal depression.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. Can you share the next steps once you were diagnosed? What kind of help you received? What kind of support you received? What plan was put into place for you?
We've got two options over here in the UK. We either have birth centres, which are midwife led, or we have hospital delivery suites, which are doctor led. And where I live in a beautiful part of the UK in the New Forest, and we have ponies roaming free, and our birth centre is in the middle of the forest. Literally, you look out the birth centre window, from the birthing pool, there's ponies roaming, there's wildlife. It was like idyllic. The downside of being on medication was I would not be able to deliver in that setting. Clear very early on that those were my wishes, and that's how I felt I would be most in control and most confident to deliver the baby. So I had the most fantastic midwife who supported every decision I had. She was so communicative that I didn't need to be put on medication. The perinatal team were happy that the communication that I had with my midwife meant that I didn't need to go on medication. But there were steps put in place. So if I was triggering certain things like, I don't know, a basic one, not showering. If my personal hygiene was not top of my list, then we were to flag that up to the midwife, because that was a sign of me slipping and me struggling. I also had a lot of help with, from a counselling perspective, I suppose, where there was a lot of conversation around I felt pregnant, why I felt pregnant, so that I could come to terms with the fact that I'd been able to conceive after all. But really, I would say I was very naive. I didn't have the confidence to go out and find the support. I don't think I had the best support. Second time round, I definitely did have, amazing support. But again, a lot of that was because I knew what I needed to ask for.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So you do have two kids. So can you explain what you went through with your second
Mm.
pregnancy? Was it similar? Were you diagnosed again?
Yeah. So obviously, in between having the two, I had postnatal depression. So when I conceived again, I was on medication. However, starting to wean myself off because we had decided that we'd like to try for a second one. Again, I wanted to deliver at the birth centre, so I knew I couldn't be on medication through the pregnancy. And again, decided that she's coming a lot quicker than I had planned. So we started trying, and 2 weeks later, I fell pregnant. So bit of a shock, bit of a surprise. But I was much more in a much more stable position. So I think prenatally that time, I had requested the same midwife. She knew my history, she knew my mental health history, and we had a plan from the beginning. So I didn't have to go down the route of telling her everything before having the second pregnancy, being in touch with teams like the crisis team, because I'd taken a slight turn for the worst when my son was about 18 months old. I had a really good plan in place. So I'd actually got myself probably to the best place I'd been psychologically for 2.5 years. I think that really, really helped going into the pregnancy with those tools already in my armor. The second pregnancy on a whole was amazing. I was very much grieving for the loss of my first pregnancy because I felt like I'd missed out on so much because I wasn't fully present. So I feel like I had that experience second time round. It was amazing in terms of, being able to really be present in the moment and experience it. We also identified that keeping busy was something that kept me out of trouble, so to speak. I worked right up until 38 weeks of my pregnancy. And that really, really helped. Even, the last couple of weeks I was huge, so uncomfortable. I could barely drive to work, but they were happy for me to just be in the office and pottering because I worked for a children's charity and they were very aware of all these things. So they did as much as they could as well to accommodate me, which again, just was massive. I also had the support then of the nursery school that my son went to. So if I was having a tough time, I had people there to talk to. So I guess I had different people, different experiences, different understandings, just helped piece that puzzle together to make everything feel a lot easier. Once I went on maternity leave, I think I was 4 days into my maternity leave, so 10 days off delivery, and I did start to slide back down that slope. But this time it was much easier to catch. So again, we have this list of triggers my husband are really aware of, that I was really aware of, and the midwife knew as well. And I think she tried to contact me for something and couldn't get through. Matt has then contacted her, my husband, and said, something's just not quite right. I'm just not sure. And within an hour, she'd called me. I was very emotional, explained that I really just couldn't get out of bed, not physically, but emotionally. I just couldn't bring myself to get up. And she was there in an hour. I don't know that that's standard practice, but the calls that she could have made from her office, she made from my lounge. So she was sat on the sofa next to me, showing me that it didn't have to be bad second time round. And what got me through those last 10 days, was having a plan. I was in control. I knew what was going to happen. My medication was prescribed and in my labour bag. So I gave birth to my daughter at 10 o'clock in the morning. I was back on my medication at 4. But again, because I wasn't on the medication straight away, I was able to deliver at the birth centre. I was able to deliver under midwife-led care. So knowing that that plan was there, I was so much more capable of making it through. But very much, I would say, any time that I've struggled with the perinatal depression, it had to be one day at a time because it changes so drastically. Because I think the hormones, experiencing depression in pregnancy and after pregnancy compared to now, the hormones really just pump up that dial 10 times over. It really does make it harder.
Yeah. Oh, Gemma, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it's so important for people to hear because we don't really talk about this kind of depression so much. It's not really one that people, families, women are talking about. So I think it's so important that you share your story. What do you think is something that everyone needs to know about this type of depression?
Absolutely. That's a really good question, because I think first time around, you have this expectation that everything has to be perfect. And we're told to, particularly with labor, anything could happen, plan for every eventuality. You never expect to you never expect to struggle during pregnancy or straight after delivery. It's something that is so ingrained in society that pregnancy is beautiful and the mother's glowing and it's a wonderful experience and everyone should love it. And truly, there are, and in sharing my story, I found this out. There are so many people who I didn't realize had hated being pregnant. And if I had only spoken up first time round and reached out first time round, I think I would have found the whole journey a lot easier. The first time that someone had said to me, "Oh, that's normal," it just floored me. I was not expecting that at all. After having my son, it was like a light switch had gone off. The first 2 weeks after he was delivered, I felt like me again. I felt amazing. But of course, then when I started to slide down that slope again, I was embarrassed. I didn't want to tell anyone that it was happening again. And again, that fear of, they'll take my son away. If they find out I'm having mental health problems, they'll take him away. There was such a fear. And again, as I say, in sharing, other mums come up to me in pregnancy saying, "I just don't want to do it anymore. I just don't want to do it anymore." And at that point, one lady that I worked with, actually, I really encouraged her to go and speak to our manager, our line manager, explain the situation that she was in so that she could be given, I think she ended up getting 3 or 4 days compassionate leave from work to go and speak to the GP and spend some time on really, truly on self-care to get her to a point where she felt like she could manage. Because if I had somebody that had identified that in the beginning, I don't think it would have ever got that serious. But because we don't talk up about it, no one feels confident to say, "Actually, do you know what? I really hate this period in my life. I really hate being pregnant," or "It hurts every time I move." It's so taboo. And unfortunately, I think it's leaving a lot of women vulnerable to mental health concerns that they don't feel confident enough to talk about because of fears of what could happen if they do.
Right, exactly. I fully, fully agree. Now, can we switch gears a little bit and talk about the things that have helped you, the self-care plan you put into
Mm.
place, things that help you manage your mental health?
So what I would say is 100%, I am not cured. This has not gone away. There are still days where I struggle. We'll look at it in two parts. From when I was pregnant and coming out of that postnatal side of things, a part of it was identifying that I was doing a good job, and having people acknowledge that really helped. And just having that belief that it's okay and it doesn't matter if you have a bad day, having a support network, which once I had my daughter was, even bigger. It was fantastic. I know when I had my son, I was very isolated. That made a massive impact. The biggest thing that helped was sleep, which as a new parent, we don't get. So I appreciate that that's a hard one, but it really took my husband understanding that that was a big, big part of keeping me on the positive side of that slope. And I was extremely lucky to have such a supportive partner who really could and was in a position to be able to help me a lot, like things like that, so that the days didn't feel just so hard. I think second time round, it was easier to keep my head above water because I'd already seen that I was doing what needed to be done. I was constantly getting, we'd be out in the supermarket and my son, he has the most amazing manners. Even now, people comment me on his demeanor, his attitude. It was just it just gives me such a feeling of you're doing the right thing. It's almost like hearing that little voice. You got this today. Today's a good day. You've got this. You've done it. Acknowledging the good stuff. In the beginning of having the children, it was a much smaller picture. We'd get through the morning, we'd get through the afternoon. And I think it was easier to be like that because the children's routines were broken down. It was like morning, nap time, lunchtime, nap time again. Like, it made life a lot easier. What I did notice is as they got older and we dropped nap time, for example, where I had the opportunity to, spend half an hour putting my feet up and what have you, the dynamic changed and there were other things I had to do to manage the depression in other ways. So one of those things is I have in the house, we're a very open household about it. We have, it's called a wellness toolkit. So it might be that, and to use the shower analogy again, if people are noticing that, okay, I might be having every day. I'm really good at doing that. I know that helps to get me going. But mum, you haven't washed your hair in a couple of days. That's not like you. Okay, we're starting to see the washing piling up is another one. We've got this list of triggers and signs, and then this list of things that I need to go and do. There's a whole heap of things on there, things that range from making myself a cup of tea and taking 10 minutes to be really present in the moment, drinking that cup of tea, practicing mindfulness, that kind of thing, which I know is hard when you've got a family and a job and all of these things. But if I'm showing these signs, then it's imperative that I'm doing these tasks. It ranges, it might be an hour in the bath, it might be a spa day, but it has to be a tool that fits with what's going on at the moment, the symptoms that I'm displaying, and also the life around me, I guess. For example, having a spa day was not an option when we were locked down in COVID. So I've tried a whole array of things so that I'm never at a point where it's like, oh, I'm struggling. Okay, I need to make a cup of tea, but we're out of tea bags. Right, that's it. There's nothing else I can do. It's all over, and the spiral carries on. So it's been a real time of trial and error. It's taken a long time to get to where I am now. And it's taken the help of the people that live with me, because they're the ones that see it and really see it quite often before I do. So at that point, it might be my son going, Mum, go and wash your hair. Like, go and have an hour in the bath to wash your hair. So it's not just me. It's a whole community, if you will, that has taken getting me to where I am now and moving on.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I love that you said it's like your family community. I think that's something that maybe with these mental health issues that people are kind of missing. I think it really does come down to your family and that kind of support that could help pull you through. So thank you for sharing that
Yes,
perspective.
you're welcome.
Well, Gemma, thank you so much for this and for sharing your story. Do you have any last words of wisdom or words of encouragement for those that are experiencing this type of depression?
I would say that there are so many tools out there available. Explore, see what's right for you might not be right for somebody else. I mean, over my time, I've explored things such as Reiki and shamanic journeying and crystals and prayer and a whole heap of things, as well as medication. Everything complements one another, and what might be right for you right now might not be right for you in 5 years' time. It might not have been right for you 5 years ago. So just take each day as it comes. Particularly with prenatal, postnatal depression, it's hard. You've got other people to take care of at the same time. You know, you can't put yourself first in the same way, but just incrementally, slowly, if you've got to write things down, those positive things that have happened. I think at one point I even had a post-it like, you know, the nappy didn't explode today, and I stuck it up, and it was at the end of the day, wow, what a day, you know. It was amazing. It wasn't as horrendous as I remember it being, kind of thing. Reach out to people and investigate, research, talk. Holding it in does nothing for anybody. It's only going to hurt your family, of which you are part of. You know, yourself and your family are the ones that will suffer. So think about everybody around you. You're not just healing in that act. It's for everybody involved.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for that. I think that's great for people to hear. Can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Absolutely. So I am most present on Facebook. I have a personal profile and I also have a business profile. So depending on whether you would prefer to be slightly more formal, if you don't want anyone else to know, I'd say go to my personal profile. I'm listed. I'm slightly easier to find because I still have my maiden name on there. I'm Gemma Baxter, was Jarvis. And I do hang around on Instagram a little bit, but that's more under my business page, which is Gem Baxter, V for Victor, B for Bravo, M for Mike.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. I will have all of those links in the show notes. So make sure you go check out Gemma. Gemma, thank you so much for having this super, super important conversation with me today.
Thank you, Des. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you for raising awareness because, you know, it needs to be done. Thank you.
Gemma, thank you so much for coming on and spreading awareness about perinatal depression. It is something that I didn't know about, and I'm so glad to have this knowledge now. And I hope you keep spreading the word because it's so, so important. Everyone, check out Gemma. The links are in my show notes. And please share this episode either on your social media or with somebody you know because it's such an important topic that not a lot of people know about. So spread the word. All right, I will talk to you next week. I hope you have a great week.